Good morning, everybody at the Mario. We are very delighted to have you this morning, London time. You can see we are ready for you. Our topic this morning is very simple. What did you do during the lockdown? And I'm your host, Bodo Buga. And today at the panel we have Dr. Ferdinand Lally, Dr. Roberts, Dr. Marcelina, and Racing Lally. Thank you so much for joining us. And the topic will be introduced by Dr. Marcelina. And after that, everybody will join in the discussions. Welcome to give us comments, and thanks for those who have already commented and told us what they did during this COVID-19. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Marcelina.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity once again. Greetings to everyone that is watching today or tonight or this evening. The topic is very simple: lockdown. What did you do? So that is what we're going to discuss. Feel free to join in. But before I go on to say that, I will give you a brief definition once again of what lockdown is. Lockdown, simply said, is a situation in which people are required to stay where they are, whether it's at home or in shelters, due to a specific risk. And in this case, the risk is the COVID-19, either to ourselves or to others, if people were to move freely. And this order restricts the society's movements and services. It does involve observing social distancing, 1 to 2 meters, depending on which country you are in. It also involves face mask wearing. Now, this may result into mass quarantining because of the measures that's put in place. And once lockdown is put in place, it allows the function of only essential businesses such as groceries, hospitals, and healthcare facilities to function, just to mention a few. There are positive and negative effects of the lockdown. If we look at the negative effects, perhaps it could be economic impact on the government, effects on personal economy in various ways, impact on the mental health of people. You very well know that if emotionally people withdraw, depression, paranoia, panic attacks, just to mention a few, this could be results of stress brought about as a result of the lockdown. There could be issues of gender bias based violences on the rise, negative impact on the children as a result of staying at home or staying in a confined environment whereby they don't interact with their friends. And there's also fear or stigma associated with this infection once somebody is diagnosed in the community. There are positive effects, however, of the lockdown. And the main one is to delay or to contain the spread of the disease in the community. And not all is lost. Even if we were locked down, there's virtual socialization, which has been made possible. And people are able to work from home, saving from commuting, um, and also spending enough time with families and whilst they're staying at home. Or perhaps people are learning new skills of DIY or what to do once the lockdown has been lifted, or developing new business ideas, or setting new enterprise or economic activities that would benefit them. Having just given you a brief overview of that, the actual question I'd like to pose to you is, what did you do during this lockdown? Or what did people around you do during this lockdown? Did they obey the rules? Was it a doable thing to do? Did you take up drinking and smoking in order to overcome your stress? Did you witness any increase in noise pollution around the area where you're living as a result of people being confined in one place? Or has what others done during the lockdown impacted you negatively? Or perhaps you're one of those people who've used this time well to try and think yourself um, a business plan or business idea so that you're on the road to financial success once it's been lifted. So ladies and gentlemen, it's up to you now to tell us, what did you do during the lockdown? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marcelina. Thank you. That was a short, fantastic introduction. Everybody is welcome to chip in. Everything is running in my head. What did I do? It's a big question. Anybody is welcome to tell us what they did or what people near them, around them did. I'm leaving it open. Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy I'm happy to follow after Marcelina. I want to make a couple of very broad observations, because I think whoever we are, maybe this is like an entry point, because we from let's say China to Asia, to the rest of Asia, to Europe, America, this phrase lockdown, nobody asks you what do you mean by lockdown. We know what it means. Lockdown is, as Marcelina say, stay in your place, stay where you are. But I think something important in that accepted definition is, who are we talking to? You can say stay in your place to the president. In our African context, you can say stay in your place to a peasant. And in that breadth of peoples that you're saying lockdown to, a lot of things happen. There's a lot of implications. So you can't pin the president down, because he or she has to make announcements, public health briefings every day, and a whole contingent of like a security detail that matches them up and down. And then you've got the public health professionals who have to carry their duties by way of not only instructing, but actually moving public health, personal protection equipment for the various health centers up and down the country. So in many ways, when you say lockdown is stay in your place. But for a whole range of other people with certain responsibilities, it means you can move within certain accepted norms. So that is one thing, and that is quite important. So who are we talking to? Are we talking to the president? Are we talking to the president? Are we talking to people with certain responsibilities who must continue a modicum of actually public health related interventions? So lockdown is not like no movement. And then the next thing is, when we talk about lockdown, we accept it as an important intervention. What is the impact? Who suffers? More likely than not, schools have locked down. Okay. I mean, in countries where you've got an advanced economy, you can have online schooling. But in many countries, especially in rural Africa, there is no online. So you have to be aware of that. So when you come out of lockdown, you're thinking about what is the impact of the lockdown now, and what is my worry about how long I can sustain lockdown. And to be honest, actually, what, if you think about it, is the correct mark of your lockdown? Because you can have a lockdown which is just generally, in most countries, the first lockdown was national. Coming forward, when we begin to understand this more and more, you know what, the next lockdown might be much more targeted, because there's an outbreak in a care home. Maybe care homes are not something that are common in, let's say, Africa, but you think about it as an activity that is associated with an outbreak, a collection of young people going to public events, something like that. When the healthcare authorities actually recognize that a lockdown, or now that in the UK we're thinking about it more as a restriction, not so much as a lockdown, because the term lockdown has become emotive. So I think politicians and public health authorities have to be aware of that, the implications and the connotation of the words, the phrases they use. We talked about lockdown first time round. Probably now we started talking about local lockdowns. We should think even more and more about restrictions, because the restrictions can take any form. If they're justified, put it in place. If you call it lockdown, people will run away, and behavioral change will undermine what you're trying to do. So in many ways, I think I'm looking at the situation where we have to be very strategic. But then now I look at myself, because when lockdown happened here in UK, everybody, of course, stayed at home. But immediately there was provision for people who are in the essential services. And that interestingly included people who are in research. So we were absorbed of that lockdown condition, so I could go to work. But I did feel that there was a gray area because research can be so widespread. You can do research in any area, but somehow, because I was in medical research, somehow I got given a letter, so I could actually go to work. So we had lockdown, we had furlough, which I took advantage of for just part of a month, but immediately I was recalled. So I didn't feel like I was locked down for as many months as many of the other people in the country have been from the end of March to near about now. So in many ways, lockdown has been a very different experience to different people because of what they do, because of their circumstances. And by God, what we don't know and they don't quite say is the behavioral change. So now the most recent rule is the rule of six. Who obeys it, who doesn't, which neighbor informs on others who are not obeying it. And we have to be very careful that as human beings, people will always have ways around rules. So my experience of lockdown is not so much being at home. My experience of lockdown was continuing to work. And for others, it will be wonderful to know how it impacted on their personal experiences. That's my contribution.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Robert. Dr. Robert.
It's great to know what you have been doing throughout the lockdown, Ferdinand, and that is really commendable. I have been a student, and when the situation of lockdown was pronounced, we had to stop going back to school. So we had to follow all the measures that were put forward by the UK government. And but we continued to study online. I was fortunate to be in London here and continue to study online. And of course, the situation was really there that people needed information. And I realized I had a massive social media follow back home in South Sudan and Uganda. So I decided to make fake videos throughout the lockdown that I was posting on Facebook. And of course, I believe people really followed those messages because there were lots of comments. And then I was fortunate to turn those fake Facebook videos into a YouTube channel. And then in that process of the lockdown, following the government rules, I took a video editing course from the NAS Daily. And then now I have a YouTube page that is dedicated to Corona, but now I'm digressing from Corona to general health issues on maternal and child health. And that YouTube page has been monetized. That means people are actually watching my videos, and the result of that is that I am passing messages to the people, and I'm also getting paid. At least there is $2 a day, and that is what I have been doing throughout the lockdown. Otherwise, it was a stressful time. It was not really easy, especially for me who is out of home. Especially being locked up alone here, something that I've never experienced before. I am used to staying with people at home, but what I decided to do was to call old friends on social media, discuss how they are dealing with the corona in the different countries they are. Those here in the UK, in Australia, or back home in Africa, and try to guide each other, and also getting involved in such conversation, whether online or personal conversation with people that are like-minded people that would want to join such kind of conversation. That is, in a nutshell, what I have done during the lockdown.
Oh, thank you so much, Rosie.
Hi. So I think one of the running similarities between everyone's experience of lockdown has been the amount of uncertainty that it's created, not only within like how we all presently like receive the news and came to understand what the lockdown would mean for our everyday lives and our employment and all of those things, but also everyone, upon instantly when the definition was made clear, would have understood how huge the knock-on impact of it would be in terms of your future opportunities or anything you've lined up within the next 3 to 6 months. Personally, as a student as well, when the lockdown happened, I observed a lot of students who were obviously living away from home have to make incredibly difficult decisions on whether they were to go back to their family home and possibly have a guilt of putting people at risk who may be elderly within their family circle, or to stay in university accommodation where maybe they're personally more exposed, maybe due to whatever employment changes happen, they would be financially less secure and have to go through a lot of very tough decisions in a very short time space. So I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I could go home and be able to set myself up easily and most importantly quickly, and not have to deal with getting flights or a very long travel situation that could have impacted me or people around me that negatively. When I then got home, the primary concern was getting my exams finished. So obviously the biggest, I think there are two things that I focused on primarily during this lockdown. And firstly was making sure that my studies weren't impacted too negatively, which was I think something that a lot of students would have experienced, a certain frustration as to handling all of these different exam styles or conversions of your course into courseworks and things like that. But also, I think majorly there is an understanding that this is kind of unprecedented, and to overly criticize any university or any large organization about the minutiae involved in getting prepared for a pandemic in 3 weeks is kind of like, it's a naive thing to do, to turn around to your tutor and go, well, why wasn't this thought of, So I think that was the first thing that I had to handle. And I think the second thing was much more of a personal journey of learning how to stay grounded within what I can control and what I can't control. And I think that's a big lesson that everyone, regardless of what your specific lockdown looked like, had to come to terms with. I mean, there are people who have been in very difficult situations where their employment is uncertain, or very difficult situations about where they're staying during this time. And I think the ability to center yourself and understand your mental health is incredibly important, to understand that your physical health is incredibly important, and that in a situation where you don't know what you have the capability of doing in the next month, you have to look at things on a week by week basis. And that's incredibly difficult to say to someone when they're planning a family, a wedding, a career change. It's very difficult to then turn around and say, you can't be thinking in those long goals right now because you don't know if legally you will be allowed to be out of your house. And I think that was probably one of the biggest things, that mental shift that I had to focus on. And I think once that was something I could really observe and understand and meditate on, I think once that was solved, I think that was one of the best things that I could do during the lockdown period, because then you can absorb any of the information on the news or just personally in your family in a much more calm and measured manner. It's difficult, but it's something that you can really train yourself into, that will allow you to absorb any of the information that you need, rather than any of the paranoia and the anxieties that come with the uncertainty of the lockdown period.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Briefly, also me, what I did was I realized that when they announced the lockdown, a lot of the time I was thinking about the lockdown itself. And it's really thinking about, I found that I had a lot of reasons to go out. And, one point to go and shop, one point to go to the garden. But I found out that there's a lot of reasons. Really, my brain was working against a lot because it was something very strange, something I have never seen because I'm used to socializing, living with people. So the lockdown was really a big shock to me mentally, and all the time I was thinking about it to the extent got fed up of the news talking about it, the numbers of people affected, the number of deaths. Then I also thought about maybe instead of thinking negatively about it, do something for the community. So I thought about starting this group whereby people, because there are already over 11,000 Mali people who are in the Mali or Mali O, which is the Mali Forum. So I thought about starting this group and talking about the coronavirus to the people and also talking about other cultural activities of the Mali. So basically, that's what I did in short term. Um, yeah, thank you. So really listening to everybody, I'm like, wow, people have, out of very difficult situations, people make them good, out of it, which is very positive, which is, which is fantastic, I should say, and especially for the people who have been going to the university to study. I was so worried, how would this happen? Because if you needed a lab, how would you, use the facility if you cannot, if there is a lockdown? How would you use the lab? How would you use the library? How would you talk to your tutor? How, all of these questions were lingering in my mind, and I'm thinking, would this be a dead year for our young people who are in the universities? Or what would happen? I'm really happy to hear that, despite of all of this, you people who have been in the university have been able to move on and really to do something. I hope you'll be graduating as well. If, like Robert, I think you haven't lost a year, have you?
No, I've not. I'm not in a graduating year so far. I still will actually be heading to my back to Wales next week in order to start my new
Okay.
year. Even though a lot of my modules will be taught online, there are still some socially distant practical elements. So I'm still going through, but I haven't lost a year, thankfully. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no,
And the same with me too. We never lost a year. We were only given an extension for those who did not wish to do the exams because of the impact of the lockdown. Other people decided to push their exams to October next month, but I decided to do mine. Really, I wanted to get done and dusted with the course.
thank you.
Yeah,
So we can
can I
now
say something,
start.
Chair?
Yeah.
I wanted to make this contribution after the comments of Roshin and Robert, especially about the academic or calendar year for the academic programs, because there's two things which actually are very important. One is, what have we learned so far, through the pandemic, lockdown, and every other ramification, but also what is the new normal? And in answer, I would say uh, there's certain things we have learned. We can point to them, we can identify them, and it is different from for each and every one of us. The new normal is something we think we should be doing, but the new normal is a moving target. It's constantly changing because I think 3 months ago we knew and got to understand COVID-19 better to the extent that we behaved in a certain way, we did certain things. Now we're doing actually slightly different things. 3 months down the line, we'll probably do even more things that us. So we have to be accepting of the fact that the so-called new normal is a moving target, is a never-changing thing. If we're at ease with that, we will actually do well. Every time we recognize a new fact, we change our ways by those facts. But the first thing is this: what have we learned? Because now, looking back, we know what we've learned. One of the things we've learned is that some people had to continue working. First and foremost, with healthcare providers, they had to continue to work. There was no question about that. Next is the category of people who were considered essential workers. You know what? They don't have to be the scientists who are studying COVID only. They're the bin men collecting rubbish in their neighborhood. So that has been recognized. Those are the facts about what we've learned, that we have to allow a certain level of functionality in society. But the thing we want to do most is prevent the transmission in the community. And the way in which we do that is social distance, which is why governments have agonized about if and if at all when schools to reopen. Schools are reopening now. Not at the same time, not in every country. But the important thing is that when schools reopen, just like schools, when other economic activities are revived, certain things will hit us, like the increase in the transmission, like the second wave, whatever. Immediately that happens, we should be prepared to say, you know what, maybe we moved too fast, or on occasions, actually, we moved too slowly. So I think what I'm saying is this: we have to be prepared that anytime we get a new piece of information, we have to use that as parcel of our approach to how best we can survive this. And I was happy to hear Dr. Robert talk about his blog site, and I'm quite interested in that sort of thing. In a small way, doing a panel discussion like this, we're doing the same thing he's doing. But he is pitched and he's on a platform which is probably more scientific. His audience will be different. I'm quite interested in that as well. But we should be very aware of the platform we have, the audience we have, the message we give, the impact it will have. If we cannot measure those things, you know what? We are not doing much. So I'm saying this. It is wonderful that from time to time I keep reminding the chair and Marcelina that, you know what? Every comment that our listeners post, they are very important. I'm happy to actually be stopped in my track and asked to answer to somebody who is in the audience asking a question, because this is a very important thing. This is a public service we're giving. We're talking to an audience out there who relate to us in many ways, because I think they know us as we know them. So if today the pandemic is posing us a societal problem, the people who will deal with those closest to us are the people who will be in our audience. So in a very important way, I think we have to respect and recognize that audience. And any time that they want to ask us questions, you know what, whatever we decided we're going to talk about today, it is worth our while to actually think of the questions they're raising, throwing at us, to be addressed and answered first before we even continue. So in many ways, for me, the thing is, let's come back to what has the pandemic taught us? What have we learned? And what is the new normal? And for different people, us sat here mainly in London, or our brethren sat in Southern Sudan, Uganda, and everywhere else, you know, those realities are slightly different. And we should be able to relate to that and also acknowledge and share with them the fact that, you know what, if they see different facts, they should know that their reaction, their way of dealing with this should be in principle the same, but in practice different, because the facts they see on the ground are different. And that's really what I wanted to say. And I would encourage Robert actually to share his blog post widely, and over time, maybe, you know what, I will chip in and join him.
Lovely. On that note, the people, we got feedback from the people in back home yesterday, and they said, one lady said she was digging, she dug a couple of acres and she planted okra, she planted different types of crops, which is fantastic. And another person also said that they went out and they dug their garden. So back home, people are also doing things for themselves. The lockdown gave them time to do things for themselves, maybe things they wouldn't have done if they were to go out and work. This morning, we got a feedback saying, good to see you, Master in a mode of regional robot and racing. And that is the only feedback so far. Thank you.
Yeah, I think from my side, probably what I experienced is not far from anybody who was working. But I must admit that when this coronavirus came to play, boy, it really gave people that fear, that shock, if you like, isn't it? Because left with us alone, I mean, you go to work, you know what you do, but again, is it something transmitted from person to person? Is it airborne? Is it not? At the beginning, I think it was very stressful to go to work. I worked throughout the COVID-19 period. Up to now, I'm still working anyway. And so to go to work and come back to your family at home can be quite challenging because you're wondering, oh, could it be today I got infected and I'm bringing the infection back home to the family? That is a very big stress that people who are working went through. And I've got friends or family, rather friends or colleagues that I know, people who work in the hospital in their acute setting, they don't come back home to their families. Or if they came, they've separated, their sleeping quarters from the family. So you find the person sleeping in the sofa or in the living room, try and avoid being too much close contact with the family. Or others who are working in the nursing home, staying there until such a time that maybe they've done their time or they felt it was a little bit less risky for them to come back home. So those are the kind of stress at work that one went through because you don't know who is going to catch it or if your colleague had this infection. Are you going to be the next one? So that was quite tricky. But we as soldiers carried on. We did not shy away from working. I continued working and as anybody else in the NHS. We worked throughout the season until such a time we thought, wow, the worst is done. But of course, with the winter coming, it's not certain whether any wave that's going to come is going to be worse than what it was. If you hear from the news that yesterday was up to about 4,000 new cases diagnosed in a day. So it can still be scary and it can still bring that spike which may bring another possibility of us being locked down. But not all was work. So whilst during the lockdown happened, I was also doing my service to the community. There was a group set just like this by the South Sudanese women intellectuals, where I spoke a couple of times about the COVID-19 and other matters to try and educate those or give out resources for those who will need. And now I'm on this platform as well. I have tried to develop something in the native language so that each and everybody who may struggle with English can understand what it is. So I put out an audio there in Mali language. I'm in the middle of doing a few others as well, just to try and give back to the community, particularly those who cannot maybe get access easily to a platform with a set time like what we're doing now. And there's more to do. But having said that, I just wanted to ask ourselves or ask maybe others. I haven't seen people bringing the comment. There are negative impacts of this COVID-19, maybe not particularly to us, but maybe around people, us, or maybe our neighbors. People have lost jobs, we know that. People whose mental health was already suffering might have gone worse. So in your experience, have you come across people taking up to drink because of the isolation or the loneliness they're going through or the stress they're going through? Or have you known anybody who has suffered maybe domestic violence or suffered in any form? I mean, we are all talking from perhaps the professional aspect or our own experience, but there could be a neighbor out there or a friend out there that you know who's gone through all this. Some people take to smoking, anything. It would be nice to hear that aspect of
Marcelina, I wanted just to say this, not by way of answering the question you've asked, which I think I want others to take the opportunity to answer. I wanted to say one or two things, the difference in which this social distancing and lockdown means between population here in the West and population at home. But I want the others to take this opportunity to answer your direct question first. But I'll come after that. Because I think I've got one or two things to say. Maybe in the end, I might also
yeah,
address.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Also, I think the younger generation, Rosine, how do you guys deal with this lockdown? I mean, I have children of my own. They're probably older than you. How do you deal with it? You find yourself all of a sudden your friends are not there. There's no clubbing. There's no socializing. All these are the kind of things I'm interested in hearing. The social aspect of it as well.
Well, in terms of the social aspect, I think there was a very, as someone who's also in university, there is a certain, when people are between the ages of in their 20s or just turned 18 and things like that, there's a certain amount of independence and real like personhood that you feel being able to control your social life. People learn to drive, people move out of the house, people set up their own social circle and routine. And I think it's one of the huge benefits of university is you go and you become a very social person who you discover yourself through other people. And I think when all types of socializing that are typically advertised to young people all stopped, I think there was a very genuine like frustration, because firstly, I mean, no one of any age group likes to be told who they can go and see, because there's just a certain like innate sort of, well, I'm an adult and I know how to go and socialize safely. There's a certain like innate response like that. But also I think more often than not would force people to be in situations where there is a real risk of like loneliness and mental health issues consuming your whole day if you don't have work, if you don't have studying, if you don't have anywhere to go physically in order to process your emotions or go and socialize in a healthy format. Then there are a lot of people who will turn to a kind of devil may care attitude of, oh, well, I'm not doing anything today, I'll start drinking at this time. Like there is a real temptation to, instead of being like strong enough to convert your time and be incredibly productive and start a business and things, there are people who, for very valid reasons, just feel like that's not something they're capable of and will use alcohol. And I think over social media and over a lot of communications with people, not only in my own circle, but what I've observed, there's a certain almost, I'm not quite sure how to phrase it. I mean, I think everyone understood that the situation at the beginning, at least, was incredibly dark, and young people in general, when huge nationwide events take place, I think feel very looked over and very criticized for how they socialize and how they interact with each other. So there's a certain feeling of, well, if they're just going to think that I drink and I'm lazy and do nothing all day, well, then that's what I'm going to do, because I can't prove them otherwise, because I wasn't an essential worker, so I lost my job, and my university stopped messaging me because all their staff have gone home, and there is it's hard to kind of fight that thing of, well, if the news is going to say that I'm not social distancing, and that because of all the young people going to illegal raves and whatnot, like if they're all going to label me as someone who's not contributing, despite the reason being that all of my avenues to contribute have been kind of blocked from me, then yeah, I'm going to have a drink at 10:30 in the morning. Like, I'm not doing anything today. And I think it's very, like, I would be naive to say that people don't do that. But I think at least in my friendship group and in the latter part of the lockdown, this has been a huge growing up process for everyone of every age group to understand that, yes, everyone is capable of just throwing their hands up and staying in bed all day. But if that happens, you're the only one who's going to suffer from it. And I've seen people go through huge personal arcs of understanding that you can make productivity and you can make yourself projects and self-improve, and sometimes you do just have to like force yourself to do it, because otherwise you'll just waste away, be that in terms of your physical health or your mental well-being. Like, it's very easy to sleep and watch Netflix and not do a lot, but it's not something that you should do, because you can always be so much more than that. So I think in terms of socially, I did a lot of Zoom meetings with people. Ferdinand helped us set up a lot of Zoom meetings with people in Nalia, which was really nice because we got to reconnect to the family a bit. And I was also very fortunate enough to be locked down with my family, which is kind of a very fortunate position. I think Dr. Roberts, being locked down by yourself would have been incredibly different, and I imagine much harder, because there's no one who can like see you maybe sitting on the sofa for too long or anything like that. Like, I think having family and having the ability to check in with people is a huge, huge privilege. And whether that's online or by the phone, like, we should, like, if the lockdown has taught us anything, it's the value of giving someone a message saying, "Are you all right? Haven't heard from you in a while." And I think a lot of young people have understood that better.
Wow. Wow. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
That's fantastic. I just want to say that we have now passed half our time. We're close to 12 o'clock. So we're left with only, I would say, 10, but because we started late. I would apologize to our audience to bear with us. We might finish a little bit late this morning, UK time. Yeah, I would want to say that thank you very much, Rosine. That was very, very, very helpful, because as a parent myself, I want to know what's happening in the minds of the young people like you. And I have a small experience here of my son. During the lockdown, or of course, they all were sent back home. He's working, and after the lockdown, when the lockdown was eased, they were called back to work. And when he went back to work, he found that his boss had terminated the contract of everybody except him. What was running in his mind was he would get in because he's into, he's a very good business manager. He would come and manage the business for him and bring in more resources. So as soon as they went back, there were so many phone calls coming in and people asking for their monies back because the services were not delivered. And he had to receive these phone calls and even he didn't know what to tell those people behind, talking to him. And he said, I had to tell a lot of lies because I didn't know what to say. And in the end, he said the office was very empty and there was no social life in the office like before. It's just him and the boss. He decided to quit. You see, he decided to leave his job. I asked him, because I remember before he decided to quit, every Mondays he was traveling to go. When I asked him, it's really depressing me. Going into, we had a full office, full office of 9 or so, going back and finding it's only me and the boss. And the whole day, what we have to do is, hello, how are you? How was your lunch? How was your day? That's all. And there's no other things. So he could cope, he just had to pay. So that's the experience we have.
I mean, I think the fact that a lot of young people or so-called non-essential workers had to lose their income so suddenly was a very big indicator of what companies really care that much for their workforce, and which companies are like primarily looking at a bottom line. Like, I know that there I think there have been so many things recently that have caused people to feel very genuine anger and upset about where their place is in a society that says they care about them, but then gets rid of their job with very little notice, or doesn't give them their entitled furlough, or cuts their pension and things. And I think this lockdown, and seeing how different companies responded to probably their most vulnerable workers, is very telling and very important for us to remember coming out of lockdown, when they all turn around and realize they need a workforce that doesn't really trust them anymore.
That's right. And even for my son's case, to make it worse, his boss owed him a lot of money, and he doesn't know what to do now, how to get his money. It's over 10K. So he didn't know what to do, and very frustrating situation. Yeah.
And unfortunately, more seem to be coming on the way. What shall we do?
I
Um,
mean, sorry, I don't want to speak over anyone.
No,
yeah.
no, we're not. We're not
People,
trying to put you on the spot. But yeah, it's very good contribution you're giving us. We're learning. It's not trying to put you on the
yeah,
spot by all means.
Well,
yeah.
I
We're
think
not trying to put you on the spot.
I think there is because of how anxious people have felt during the lockdown uncertainty. I think there is a real thirst for positive news and like closure on things. But I think we mustn't let our want to have lockdown be finished and to have situations be resolved that let us forget about how the government, how people, how organizations have acted towards us during what is one of the largest kind of economic moments in recent history. I think there are many people, I know that we've had neighbours who have been made redundant due to not only just them a company axing their workforce throughout lockdown, but also through the evolution of what the working day has become, has made like their position just redundant now. And I think there are two things that we need to keep in mind. Firstly, we need to see who got left behind in lockdown, and I think by speaking to lots of people through in different sectors of society, you can understand that in much better detail. I'm a young student who was fortunate enough to like live at home and have a home to come to when lockdown happened. Someone who's living independently, someone who lives in a different continent would have had an incredibly different experience. And so it's important to understand like who's been left behind in those sectors, in minimum wage jobs, in not being considered an essential worker. But the second thing to remember is how the working day has immediately shifted and become so increasingly available to so many different people. We've had this system of 9 to 5 office work for a very long time, and a lot of people don't even understand why that is. They don't understand why we work 5 days a week and get 2 days off. And if anything, the lockdown has proven that that method not only doesn't work for everyone, but also can be changed. And a lot of people, due to disability, having a family, or being in a variety of different life situations, have been denied work because they're not able to fit into this 9-to-5 model in an office. But we've all been working from home. We've all been forced to create these more accessible working environments of 8 to 3 or 3 to 6, and so many people are being able to achieve like a lot more through this. They're being able to look after their children. They're able to study and work at the same time. They're able to pursue their own personal passions, and it's just like, it's a working model that can be much more universally introduced. And I feel like everyone's turning around and just sort of realizing, oh, we don't have to do what we've been doing for the last 100 years. Like maybe there's a better way for us to like make work inclusive for all these people.
Just to maybe catch you interjecting what I was saying, isn't it now the thing the government is trying to change? Working 9 to 5 or 9 to whatever time or 8 to whatever time and working from home. Isn't this now impacting on the economy of the nation? And that is what needs to change. I mean, you're quite right. These times don't mean the same thing to everybody. I still work pretty much the same hours I used to work, but the impact and the stress that is coming along with the way we work is quite different. Because majority of our work now is starting with telemedicine, if you like. You are speaking to somebody on the phone, and if they need to come in, they will then come in, and probably you may be holding the same conversation a little bit more before you do whatever intervention that needs doing. But if we were to continue the way we are doing now, will there be a shift in the economy? Are we interested in the shift in the economy, or are we interested in our personal wealth, which is our health? Sorry, not just you, somebody else could also answer that question. But if you've got the answer, by all means, fire away.
I think maybe we need to hear from somebody else.
I'm going to speak up here.
Yeah.
I'm going to speak up, but I will only speak to explain my silence. I think Roshin has done a good job. I don't mind if she continues that conversation, and Robert also. But you know what? I'll take a step back. I had one anecdote, but we can always share that another time.
Well, we've got a bit of extended time, so yeah, it's good to hear because
I think you had asked questions that we haven't answered yet, whether we have seen or heard of people who got involved in domestic violence, or people got mental conditions during the lockdown. Me personally, I think I never met someone who told me that they have been involved in domestic violence, or they are. But from the reports, at least here in the UK and other developed countries, they're able to provide such reports. But the biggest challenge is that when it comes to the low middle income countries where I come from, South Sudan and Uganda, it's very difficult to give that assessment. Probably maybe after the lockdown, countries will involve in doing evaluations to see the impact of the lockdown on mental health and the rise or drop in the cases of domestic violence. But what I also observed during this lockdown is that different countries had different ways of responding to the coronavirus. Other countries really followed scientific information. On the contrary, others really had total disregard of WHO recommendations and their health recommendation. When we talk of maybe Brazil, the United States, their leaders have been giving different information. And I also think this really influenced populations in that part of the world. A clear distinction is also can also be drawn from when you look at Uganda, South Sudan or Tanzania. Uganda was in total lockdown. These other two countries were not, and this really influenced the youth and populations there in a different way in responding to the coronavirus. I know Uganda really locked down the country seriously, and the questions will be: was that really necessary? Was that useful for that context? You see, what about Tanzania? They are freely moving businesses all over the place, and I think these are the discussions that also we need to get involved in too. And these are basically some of the observations that I have made, have seen during the lockdown. So there was basically no single unified messages from the world leaders to the world population. Uh, Lots of our leaders, world leaders have influences all over the world. When you look at the Trump, probably also response to the coronavirus was influenced because by politics. When, like for example, the Trump was looking at re-election, and his biggest ticket was the economy. So of course we do know that the lockdown really badly influenced the economy in a negative way, and Trump didn't care about. He had total disregard of the health information. For example, wearing masks. I think he didn't take that one serious. He's not passionate about lockdown. So my observation from the political space is that there was no single unified approach in response to the coronavirus worldwide, and this one impacted the populations in different ways. That is an observation that I made. So maybe we can go back to talk about the economy that Dr. Marcelina, is talking about. I just wanted to add on that.
I just want to bring it to your attention that we're coming, we're only left with another 5 minutes. So it's a very hot debate, and it's very interesting. I've loved us to carry on and to listen more and more to know, what people did, and how other people's behaviors impacted on their lives. And we have also heard that the government's behavior actions have also impacted on us in different ways. In that the decisions taken by the government, of course, those are the behaviors have impacted on us as well. But unfortunately, for today, we cannot continue with the discussion because our time has come to an end. I would ask all of you to really sum up what message would you like to send out to our people at the all in just a few minutes before I close our show for today. So anybody can start. Thank you.
You're mute.
Yeah, not so much what I did over the lockdown, but how I reflect on it. First thing is this: the anecdote I wanted to share was that we have this joke about among ourselves, the African members of my institute here in London, that back at home we remember in the village when somebody was traveling to some place and they got on a bus first thing in the morning, and there was only one person on the bus. They go and sit next to that person. Okay? Here in London, when I get on a train and there's a lot of people, I sit as far away from the next person as I can. Now, there is something quite important there about the different attitudes towards social distancing, which has become a rule. Now, I'm talking about the tendencies of people, but when you have a rule, people respond to that rule according to their tendency. Tendency at home was be closest to whoever you find, because people like to be together, talk, and all of that. Here, there is a tendency actually to be separate from the other person because you don't know them. So that's a very important thing, that when we implement something like social distancing, which was born in the West and carried like the pandemic everywhere in the world, we should be aware of how differently people will accept it. Now, that is the first thing, because to be honest, actually, social distancing has become the rule of thumb. And the next thing is probably like how we're going to go forward implementing this, because in many cases, we have to go back what have we learned? At home, the most important thing is this. I gave you an example of people sitting in a bus. The other example is quite different. If the two people who are very close together, however close, if they're outdoor in this outdoors in the open space, maybe in a garden or whatever, getting about their normal rural economy, you know what? They are a lot safer than people who are in their normal urban economy in the West, either in an office or in a household. So the two situations are very different, which may be a reason why we've had fewer cases of fatalities, let's say, and infections in Africa than here. But simply on the analysis, in my mind, I could be wrong, in my mind, that we are in a situation which is a lot riskier living in the West, a lot more congested in urban places, and back in the rural places where people are a little more dispersed. You don't have to be the scientist who knows everything about coronaviruses to find that when you're in those rural spaces, you're a lot safer. But as we go into the next phase of this disease, the scientists and the healthcare providers among us should try and translate that into a message which can be implemented to make sure that people are not too fearful but functional. And then we move on. Because God willing, we will survive this. There will be some fatalities, some casualties, but let us be very practical. Let us be very clear about how our circumstances relate to the need for like the restrictions, lockdowns, or whatever you call them, to get the best out of our people. We may suffer more than the West or vice versa, but let us suffer less than we would otherwise without the base knowledge. And I think those of us those people in public health will know this. I can tell you this, Doctors Marcelina and Robert, we have this adage that once you go into public health, you become a politician because you're deciding these issues which other people think should be for a politician. So I hope that's my last contribution.
Yeah, what's your one word you want to send out to the community?
Yeah, when you move into public health, you have become a politician because you're on policy issues.
Thank you. All right.
I think I can pick from there before giving chance to the rest of you. I'll be a story as well. There was this joke being sent around whereby people sat in an aeroplane and fastened their seatbelts. And so the sign came, toot toot, I'm pilot so and so. Today I'll be working from home. So you can imagine what that could have caused. So, so your pilot is working from home in that plane there, and then you could have a heart attack from that message, or you could sit and say, okay, what next? So the image or the message I'm trying to convey here is, yes, working from home can be practical to some, but in certain institutions or certain careers or certain professions, it's not. Therefore, as we move along in the next that is coming, we don't know how severe, maybe the public health politicians can predict what it's going to be like, but we don't know how the severity of this is going to be. So let us all do what we can in the best way we can. If you're working from home as a pilot, please remember the repercussion that will have on your passengers. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and what's your one, what the message you want to send out?
The message I want to send is simply be safe. I've learned a lot, a long way from what has happened. Whatever you do, be safe. Whether you're the pilot working from home or you are the passenger in that plane, be safe.
Thank you, Rosie.
I think the best thing people can do for themselves is just learn what your rights are at work, learn what your rights are at home, learn what learn the information you need in order to have a space during this lockdown, be that creating your own income from home or having the information you need to fight for your place in the current workforce, wherever that may be. Like, I think the more people learn, the more people have control over themselves to self-advocate. And I think that's something that's really important and that people have to embrace right now when we're all forced to be a little bit more independent than we otherwise might be prepared to be. So I guess my message is just, you know, you have control, be safe, drink water.
No, that's good. Okay, Dr. Roberts, please.
Yeah, I think my final message is to follow the guidelines provided by the different authorities in your country. And for countries that do not have specific procedures, I mean, things to follow during the lockdown, like during this coronavirus period, like lockdown, social distancing, you should be able to take your health into your hands and safeguard that. Please, whenever you go to gatherings, wear a mask and stay distant from people. Also, for if you live in a country where there are guidelines, please keep listening to the news. They really provide the changes that come in every week. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And my message is learning doesn't finish, so you will have to keep on learning. And coronavirus has never struck the world before. This is the first time. Nobody had an experience before, so we are all learning. It's your chance, and it's make sure that you keep on learning and do the right thing to protect yourself. With that said, I would like to thank everybody who has been listening to us. We don't have comments so far from what I said earlier, so I would like to tell everybody at the Mario that thank you for watching. We'll be back not next Saturday, but the Saturday after, because we come every fortnightly. Thank you so much, and bye bye from us all. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.